In the spring of 2941 of the Third Age, a wizard walked up to a round green door in the side of a hill, and with that single visit, set in motion a chain of events that would determine the fate of Middle-earth. Most people think they know this story. Gandalf needed a burglar for a company of dwarves. Bilbo Baggins happened to be available. A bit of adventure, a bit of luck, and suddenly an unassuming hobbit becomes the finder of the One Ring and the savior of a quest that should have been impossible. But here's the thing, it wasn't luck. It was never luck. Gandalf the Grey, a Maia spirit who had walked Middle-earth for nearly 2,000 years, who had watched civilizations rise and fall, who was engaged in a shadow war against the growing power of Sauron. This being did not make random choices. He didn't knock on doors by accident. He didn't select the 14th member of a dangerous quest on a whim. When Gandalf chose Bilbo Baggins, he was acting on information, intuition, and something deeper, a sense of providence that Tolkien wove into the very fabric of his world. And when you understand why Gandalf really chose Bilbo, you begin to see that The Hobbit isn't a simple adventure story at all. It's the first move in a cosmic chess game that would take 80 years to complete. Let's start with what Gandalf actually knew about Bilbo before that morning at Bag End. The films present Gandalf as someone who vaguely remembers Bilbo as a child, who shows up more or less randomly and decides on the spot that this particular hobbit would make a good burglar. But that's not what Tolkien wrote. In the books, and especially in Unfinished Tales, we learn that Gandalf had been thinking about Bilbo Baggins for a long time. Gandalf knew Bilbo's mother, Belladonna Took. This detail is easy to skip over, but it's crucial. Belladonna was one of the 3 remarkable daughters of the old Took, and in her youth she had been famous for her adventurous spirit. The Tooks were not ordinary hobbits. They were the closest thing the Shire had to an aristocratic family with a wild streak, rumored to have fairy blood in their ancestry, known for producing hobbits who actually wanted to see the world beyond their borders. Gandalf had visited the Shire many times over the centuries, and he had known the Took family well. He remembered Belladonna. He remembered her fire, her curiosity, her willingness to look beyond the comfortable boundaries of Shire life. And he saw that same spark, buried perhaps but present, in her son. Bilbo Baggins wasn't a random hobbit. He was the son of the most adventurous hobbit woman of her generation, raised in the most comfortable and respectable hobbit hole in the Shire, caught between 2 natures. The wild Took blood and the respectable Baggins propriety. Gandalf saw that tension, and he knew that under the right circumstances, the Took side could be awakened. But heredity alone doesn't explain Gandalf's choice. Plenty of Tooks existed in the Shire. Why Bilbo specifically? This is where we need to understand what Gandalf was actually trying to accomplish in 2941, because it wasn't just about helping some dwarves reclaim their mountain. Gandalf was worried about Smaug. The dragon had been sleeping on his hoard for nearly 150 years, but Gandalf knew that dragons don't sleep forever. Sooner or later, Smaug would stir, and when he did, he would be a weapon of terrifying power, a weapon that Sauron could potentially use. In Unfinished Tales, Tolkien makes this explicit. Gandalf's private motivation for supporting Thorin's quest had nothing to do with dwarvish politics or treasure. He was thinking strategically about the coming war with the Shadow. Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, sat at a crucial geographical position. If Sauron moved against the north, Smaug could devastate the regions that would need to resist him. Dale, Esgaroth, the Iron Hills, even Mirkwood and the Lonely Mountain itself. Removing Smaug wasn't a side quest. It was a preemptive military operation. But Gandalf couldn't simply march an army to the Lonely Mountain. He couldn't kill Smaug himself. That wasn't within the rules the Astari operated under. He needed a small group that could slip in quietly, find the dragon's weakness, and somehow neutralize the threat without triggering the exact catastrophe they were trying to prevent. He needed, in other words, the opposite of a hero. He needed someone who could go unnoticed. This is the genius of Gandalf's selection. He understood that the quest required someone who didn't fit the profile. Think about who else might have joined Thorin's company. Warriors, heroes, elven princes or Dunedain rangers or powerful lords. Any of these would have been more conventionally qualified for a dragon-slaying expedition. but they also would have been noticed. Sauron's spies were everywhere. The necromancer in Dol Guldur, who, as Gandalf suspected but hadn't yet confirmed, was Sauron himself, had agents throughout the Wilderland. A company of notable heroes marching toward Erebor would have drawn attention, and attention would have meant interference. A band of exiled dwarves, though, wandering through the wilderness driven by pride and grief, seeking to reclaim a kingdom everyone assumed was lost forever? That was beneath notice. That was a doomed venture that the enemy's servants would laugh at rather than oppose. And a hobbit? A hobbit was invisible in more ways than one. Gandalf chose Bilbo precisely because no one would expect him. Not the dwarves who grumbled about his uselessness. Not the enemies they would face, who had never even heard of hobbits. Not even Bilbo himself, who spent most of the journey convinced he was in over his head. Being underestimated was the point. It was the strategy. But there's something even deeper at work here, something that goes beyond strategy into the metaphysics of how Tolkien's world actually operates. Gandalf didn't just think Bilbo would be useful. He felt that Bilbo was meant to go. Tolkien was a devout Catholic, and his world, while never explicitly religious, operates according to a hidden providence. Events that seem random are often guided by forces beyond mortal understanding. Choices that appear arbitrary turn out to be essential. The small and weak are chosen over the great and mighty not by accident, but by design. When Gandalf tells Bilbo, "I am looking for someone to share in an adventure," he isn't just recruiting. He's responding to an intuition that has served him for 2,000 years, a sense that certain people are placed in his path for reasons he can't fully articulate, but has learned to trust. In his letters, Tolkien describes Gandalf as someone who operates partly through wisdom and partly through what can only be called inspiration. He knows things he shouldn't know. He makes choices that seem inexplicable, but turn out to be exactly right. This isn't magic in the conventional sense. It's attunement, a sensitivity to the deeper currents of fate that flow beneath the surface of events. Gandalf chose Bilbo because something in the fabric of the world pointed toward this particular hobbit at this particular moment. He couldn't prove it. He couldn't explain it to Thorin or to Bilbo himself. But he knew it, the way a navigator knows the stars, the way a musician knows when a note is true. And Gandalf was right. Not just about the quest succeeding, though it did, against all odds, but about what Bilbo would become through the journey, and what that would mean for everything that followed. Bilbo Baggins entered the Shire as a confirmed bachelor, a creature of comfort, a hobbit whose greatest adventure was deciding which waistcoat to wear. He returned as someone who had faced trolls and goblins and giant spiders and a dragon, someone who had navigated the politics of elves and men and dwarves, someone who had made choices, moral choices, difficult choices, that revealed a character he didn't know he possessed. And, almost incidentally, someone who had found a magic ring in a dark cave and carried it home in his pocket. This is where Gandalf's choice becomes something more than clever strategy. This is where it becomes providence. Gandalf didn't know about the ring when he selected Bilbo. He couldn't have. The ring had been lost for over 2,000 years, buried in the roots of the Misty Mountains with a creature no one in the wider world even knew existed. When Gandalf knocked on Bilbo's door, he was thinking about dragons and dwarves and the defense of the North, not about the One Ring of Sauron, but something new. This is one of the most profound ideas in Tolkien's work, that there is a force operating beneath the surface of events, arranging circumstances in ways that no character can fully perceive. Gandalf later reflects on this explicitly in The Lord of the Rings, when he tells Frodo that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, and that is an encouraging thought. Meant by whom? Tolkien never says directly, but the implication is clear. There is a will at work in Middle-earth that transcends the plans of wizards and the schemes of dark lords. And that will chose Bilbo Baggins, through Gandalf, through the accident of getting separated from the dwarves in the goblin tunnels, through the riddle game with Gollum, to be the one who would carry the ring out of the darkness and into the light. Gandalf's intuition was right, but it was right in ways far larger than he understood at the time. Now let's look at what specifically made Bilbo the right choice. Not just for the quest to Erebor, but for everything that followed. The ring corrupts. That's its fundamental nature. It works on the desires of its bearer, amplifying their ambitions, twisting their will, slowly transforming them into a vessel for Sauron's return. We see this with Gollum, who was destroyed by the ring over centuries. We see it with Boromir, who fell within weeks of being near it. We see it with Isildur, who claimed it and was killed before he could even begin to understand what he possessed. But Bilbo? Bilbo had the ring for 60 years and remained essentially himself. Oh, he was affected. He became secretive about his magic ring. He felt possessive, reluctant to give it up. In the end, surrendering it to Frodo required Gandalf's intervention and enormous effort of will. The ring was working on him the entire time, but it never consumed him. It never turned him into a wraith or a murderer or a tyrant. After 60 years with the most corrupting object in Middle-earth, Bilbo Baggins was still recognizably Bilbo Baggins. Older, wearier, stretched, like butter scraped over too much bread, but fundamentally decent. Why? What made him different? The answer lies in what hobbits are, and what Gandalf understood about them long before anyone else did. Hobbits are not great. That's the point. They have no ambition for power. They don't dream of kingdoms or glory or domination. They want good food, comfortable homes, regular meals, and the respect of their neighbors. Their desires are small, local, immediate. The ring works by amplifying desire. But what happens when you put it on the finger of someone whose deepest desire is a well-stocked pantry and a warm fire? Not much. The ring couldn't offer Bilbo anything he actually wanted. World domination? He'd never considered it. Immortality? Hobbits don't think in those terms. Wealth? He was already comfortable. The ring whispered promises of power, and Bilbo's soul responded with the Hobbit equivalent of a shrug. This is what Gandalf intuited when he chose Bilbo. Not consciously. He didn't know about the ring, but on some deeper level. He understood that hobbits possessed a resistance to corruption that the great and powerful lacked. Their smallness was their strength. Their lack of ambition made them immune to the temptations that destroyed greater beings. When Gandalf said he preferred the company of hobbits to lords and heroes, he wasn't being sentimental. He was articulating a profound truth about how evil works and how it can be resisted. But there's another quality Bilbo possessed that made him uniquely suited for what was coming: mercy. The most important moment in The Hobbit, the moment that Gandalf later describes as the pivot on which everything turned, isn't the death of Smaug or the Battle of Five Armies. It's a small, quiet scene in a dark cave where Bilbo has every reason to kill Gollum and chooses not to. Think about that scene. Bilbo is lost, alone, terrified. He has a sword. He has a ring that makes him invisible. Gollum is between him and the exit, and Gollum has made it clear he intends to eat Bilbo if he catches him. Every rational calculation says, strike now, while you have the advantage, and survive. But Bilbo doesn't. In a flash of insight, he sees Gollum not as a monster but as a pitiable creature, alone, wretched, consumed by his obsession. And instead of killing, Bilbo leaps over Gollum and runs for the exit. This is the choice that saves Middle-earth. Not because it was strategically wise, and it wasn't, but because it demonstrated something about Bilbo's character that would echo across decades. Gollum survived because Bilbo showed mercy, and because Gollum survived, he was there at Mount Doom 60 years later to bite the ring from Frodo's finger and fall into the fire. The destruction of the ring, the defeat of Sauron, the salvation of Middle-earth, all of it traces back to a single moment when a frightened hobbit chose pity over violence. Gandalf couldn't have predicted this, but he chose someone capable of it. This brings us to the deepest level of Gandalf's choice. He was selecting not just for competence, but for character. The quest to Erebor didn't need a skilled burglar. If skill were the only criterion, Gandalf could have found a human thief from Bree or Dale, someone with actual experience in stealth and larceny. What the quest needed, what the future needed, was someone whose heart was fundamentally good. Gandalf had watched the great and powerful fail for 2,000 years. He had seen the rings of power corrupt the kings of men. He had watched Numenor fall to pride and ambition. He had witnessed the slow decline of every civilization in Middle-earth, the entropy of nobility into weakness, the transformation of heroes into tyrants or shadows of their former selves. And through all of that, he had noticed something. The small folk endured. Hobbits didn't build empires. They didn't wage wars of conquest. They didn't produce mighty kings or terrible villains. They just lived, quietly, contentedly, generation after generation, tending their gardens and celebrating their birthdays and minding their own business while the great dramas of the world swirled around them. There was wisdom in that. Gandalf saw it. The elves, in their pride, overlooked the hobbits entirely. The dwarves ignored them. Men didn't know they existed, but Gandalf visited the Shire again and again, watching, learning, coming to understand that these overlooked creatures possessed something precious, a groundedness, a resistance to the diseases of power that infected every other race. When the moment came to select a member for Thorin's company, Gandalf reached for that quality. He didn't need another warrior. He needed a hobbit, and not just any hobbit. He needed Bilbo specifically because Bilbo contained contradictions that made him uniquely suited for growth. A pure Baggins would have refused the adventure entirely, too comfortable, too set in his ways, too convinced that adventures were nasty things that made you late for dinner. A pure Took might have been too reckless, too hungry for excitement, too likely to take foolish risks at crucial moments. But Bilbo was both. He had the Baggins caution and the Took curiosity, the respectability and the wildness, the love of home and the secret longing for something more. He was stable enough to resist the ring's corruption and adventurous enough to carry it into danger. This tension was what Gandalf recognized that morning at Bag End. When he looked at Bilbo Baggins standing in his doorway, pipe in hand, protesting that hobbits didn't go on adventures, Gandalf saw someone who was lying to himself. Someone who had buried his Took nature under layers of Baggins' propriety but hadn't killed it. Someone who needed only the right push to become something extraordinary. The dwarves saw a grocer. Gandalf saw a hero waiting to be born. And so we come to the morning itself, that famous scene at Bag End that set everything in motion. Most adaptations play this moment for comedy. Gandalf shows up, Bilbo is flustered, the dwarves arrive and eat all his food, and eventually everyone marches off on an adventure. It's charming. It's funny. It's also misleading about what Gandalf was actually doing. Gandalf didn't arrive at Bag End to have a pleasant chat. He arrived to conduct an evaluation. When Gandalf says good morning, and Bilbo responds with his famous series of interpretations, do you mean to wish me a good morning, or that it is a good morning whether I want it or not? That exchange isn't idle wordplay. Gandalf is testing. He's probing Bilbo's mind, assessing his wit, watching how he handles an unexpected conversational challenge. And when Gandalf mentions adventures, he's watching Bilbo's reaction with the careful attention of someone who has been reading people for 2,000 years. The words say no. The body language says something else. There's a flicker in Bilbo's eyes, a momentary hesitation before the refusal that tells Gandalf everything he needs to know. The Took isn't dead. It's just sleeping. So Gandalf makes his mark on Bilbo's door. A sign for the dwarves, yes, but also a commitment. He has made his choice. Whatever Bilbo says, whatever protests he offers, Gandalf has decided that this hobbit will go on this quest. And then he orchestrates the dinner party. The arrival of the dwarves is often treated as chaos, and it is, from Bilbo's perspective. But from Gandalf's perspective, it's carefully managed chaos designed to achieve a specific psychological effect. Think about what happens. Dwarves arrive in waves, eating Bilbo's food, drinking his wine, throwing his dishes around, completely disrupting the ordered comfort of Bag End. Bilbo is horrified. His respectable Baggins' life is being invaded by chaos, dirt, and noise. But he doesn't throw them out. This is the test. Any hobbit might be polite to one unexpected guest, but 13 dwarves pushing every boundary of hospitality? That requires something more than politeness. It requires a fundamental decency, a willingness to extend generosity even when it's inconvenient, even when it's being abused. Bilbo passes, grumbling, stressed, completely overwhelmed, but he passes. He feeds them. He houses them. He even starts to get curious about what they're discussing. And then Thorin arrives. Thorin's entrance changes the emotional temperature of the room entirely. The other dwarves are boisterous, comic, almost buffoonish. Thorin is none of these things. He's grim, regal, carrying the weight of a lost kingdom on his shoulders. When he looks at Bilbo, there's no warmth, only skepticism bordering on contempt. "So, this is the Hobbit," Thorin says, and his tone makes clear exactly what he thinks. This moment is crucial because it shows Bilbo what he's really up against. The dwarves don't believe in him. Their leader actively doubts him. The quest ahead is dangerous beyond anything Bilbo has ever imagined, and the people he'd be facing it with see him as a liability at best. A lesser hobbit would have seen Thorin's contempt as permission to refuse. "You're right. I'm not qualified. Good luck. Goodbye." Every reasonable calculation points towards staying home. But something else is happening inside Bilbo. Something is stirring. The very fact that he's being underestimated is awakening a stubbornness, a need to prove himself that Bilbo didn't know he possessed. This is what Gandalf was counting on. He knew that Bilbo needed to be challenged, needed to face doubt and dismissal, needed something to push against. Comfort wouldn't draw out the Took. Contempt might. And then Gandalf plays his final card, the song. When the dwarves begin to sing of the lonely mountain, of dragonfire and stolen gold, of the darkness in the deep places and the longing for a home lost, something breaks open in Bilbo. Tolkien describes it as the awakening of something Tookish in him, but it's more than that. It's the awakening of imagination, of longing, of the capacity to care about something beyond his own comfort. Bilbo has never seen the lonely mountain. He has no stake in the dwarves' quest. But the song creates one. It plants an image in his mind, not of treasure, but of loss, of displacement, of a people driven from their home by fire and death, wandering for generations, dreaming of return. Bilbo feels that. Despite himself, despite his Baggins' practicality, he feels the weight of their grief and the pull of their hope. And in that moment, the question shifts from, "Why should I go?" to, "How could I not?" Gandalf knew this would happen. He had seen Bilbo's imagination, his capacity for empathy, his secret romantic streak that years of respectable living had almost smothered. The song was designed to reach exactly that part of him. By the time the evening ends, Bilbo is still protesting. He still insists he won't go. But Gandalf sees the truth. He's already going. He just doesn't know it yet. When Bilbo runs out of his door the next morning without his pocket handkerchief, leaving his comfortable life behind on an impulse, that's not luck. That's the culmination of everything Gandalf set in motion. Every choice Gandalf made was calculated to produce this moment. Selecting Bilbo based on his ancestry and character, testing him with the unexpected visit, overwhelming him with the dwarves, presenting him with Thorin's doubt, and finally, opening his heart with a song of loss and longing. Bilbo didn't go on the quest because he was randomly chosen. He went because Gandalf understood exactly what kind of person he was and created the precise conditions needed to awaken what was dormant inside him. This is wizard craft, not in the sense of spells and fireballs, but in the deeper sense of understanding how souls work and how to move them. And the consequences of this choice rippled across 60 years and 2 wars. Bilbo found the ring. Because he was who he was, merciful, decent, resistant to corruption, he carried it safely for decades without being destroyed by it. He passed it to Frodo, who inherited not just the ring, but the example of how to bear it. The lessons Bilbo learned on his adventure, courage, mercy, resilience, became the foundation of everything Frodo would do. If Gandalf had chosen differently, if he had selected a human thief or a dwarvish scout or anyone other than Bilbo Baggins, the ring would never have made it to Mount Doom. The wrong bearer would have been corrupted. The wrong character would have killed Gollum. The wrong soul would have failed at the crucial moment. Gandalf couldn't have known all of this in 2941, but he knew enough. He knew that character matters more than competence. He knew that the small and overlooked can accomplish what the great and powerful cannot. He knew that when you're facing impossible odds, you don't choose the obvious hero. You choose the one who has the heart for the journey, even if they don't know it yet. So what does this tell us about Tolkien's worldview? What does Gandalf's choice of Bilbo reveal about how the universe actually works in Middle-earth? It tells us that providence is real, but not obvious. The hand that guides events doesn't announce itself with thunderbolts and miracles. It works through intuition, through the quiet nudges that lead wise people to make choices they can't fully explain. Gandalf felt that Bilbo was right for the quest. He couldn't prove it, but he trusted the feeling, and the feeling turned out to be connected to something much larger than he knew. It tells us that the humble are exalted. This is one of Tolkien's most consistent themes, that power corrupts, that ambition destroys, and that the salvation of the world depends not on the mighty, but on the small. Bilbo wasn't chosen despite being a hobbit. He was chosen because he was a hobbit. His insignificance was his qualification. And it tells us that mercy creates possibility. Gandalf chose someone capable of pity, and that capacity turned out to be the thing that saved everything. In a world where the logical choice is often violence, where kill or be killed seems like obvious wisdom, Tolkien insists that mercy opens doors that nothing else can open. Bilbo's pity for Gollum wasn't weakness. It was the hinge on which the fate of the world turned. Gandalf didn't choose Bilbo by luck. He chose him by wisdom, by intuition, and by a faith in the hidden workings of a world that rewards goodness in ways that can't always be predicted. And Bilbo, for all his protests, was exactly what the world needed. Not a hero in the conventional sense, but something rarer and more valuable. A good person in the right place at the right time, with enough courage to step out his door and see what would happen. That wasn't luck, it was Gandalf. And behind Gandalf, something larger still. The quiet hand that moves through all of Tolkien's work, arranging circumstances, selecting instruments, weaving the choices of free beings into a pattern that bends, always, toward hope. If you've ever wondered why Gandalf trusted a fussy, comfort-loving hobbit with the fate of Middle-earth, now you know. It was never about luck. It was about seeing what others couldn't see, trusting what couldn't be proven, and believing that the smallest person can change the course of the future. Subscribe to Echoes of Middle-earth, and join us as we keep uncovering the hidden depths beneath the stories you thought you knew. Ring the bell so you never miss a deep dive. And tell me in the comments, do you think Gandalf fully understood what he was setting in motion when he knocked on Bilbo's door? Or was even the wizard just an instrument of something greater? Until next time.